and welcome to The One. My name is George Schlackheg,
The One.
and I created this channel to share my experience with drones. I've been flying drones for just over 2.5 years, which isn't really a lot, but it was definitely a steep and constant learning curve. This video is for those of you who would like to get into drones and aren't yet sure how to go about it. When you go on Amazon, for example, it can be overwhelming. There are offerings in all different price ranges boasting features like GPS, autonomous flight modes, and more. As someone who's new to drones, how do you know the crap from the good drones? As you'll see, even price isn't necessarily a good indicator. Who wants to spend more than they really have to? I remember what it was like being there. I didn't want to spend a fortune because I was worried about crashing my first drone and losing my investment. But I wanted something that could fly well, had a return to home feature just in case, and of course, could record half decent video. Everybody I talked to recommended the DJI Mavic Mini, new or used. Cheaper drones were not recommended or even laughed at as kids' toys. I found the DJI Mavic Mini too expensive for a first drone, especially since there were so many cheaper options. Another concern was how small this thing was. Less than 249 grams? I didn't believe that this could be a capable drone. How was that even possible? At the time, I didn't even know that you needed a license in Canada to fly any drone that weighs above 249 grams. Blissfully ignorant, I ordered a Holy Stone HS700D. It had all the features I wanted, plus a 2K camera, which was better than Full HD and thereby theoretically should have put out even better footage than the Canon I was using to record my videos. How could I go wrong for under $200 Canadian, brand new on eBay? By the way, this drone is still available today with some small improvements. Well, it now costs $499 Canadian. Make that $500 with the taxes and shipping on Amazon and has a 4K camera. I'll talk about that a bit more, but let me tell you what it was like to learn how to fly this drone. My first flight was in a wide open field. It was very exciting because it was all brand new. The first step before taking off, before every flight, is compass calibration. Once the drone was up in the air, I had trouble controlling it, and it almost felt like it had a mind of its own. But at some point, I must have got the hang of it, and after 12 minutes or so, managed to land it safely on the ground. The footage I got was nothing spectacular, but it was my first aerial footage, and it motivated me to go flying again a few days later. This time I didn't only break the Canadian aviation regulations, but also an Edmonton City bylaw, because I flew in a park.
No!
This time I was quite impressed with my footage, but it was still shaky and looked kind of distorted. A few days later, I got the surprise of my life when, after a rather disappointing flight over some river ice, the drone first landed, but then took off completely on its own without me controlling it. When I picked up the controller and tried to regain the connection, it didn't respond. I wasn't even doing anything with the remote control. All of a sudden the drone was like, woo! All I could do was watch it disappear into the distance, all the while freaking out about where it might eventually crash and perhaps cause damage I'd be liable for. Still interested? According to the manufacturer, this sort of flyaway was impossible, and yet it had happened. I figured that there must have been some defect with my drone and tried to get a replacement from the seller. They offered one at a discount, but asked a bunch of questions like how many satellites the drone was connected to and what the temperature was at the time of the flight. The deal they were offering didn't seem that great, so I skipped it. Then a friend told me about licensing and registration requirements. Oops. I don't know about you, but even with the drone exam costing only $10 and registration only 5, it is still a pain having to do this for an entry-level drone, which basically is a toy, as you'll find out. The test for your drone license is not that hard if you do your research, but you still have to spend valuable time to pass it. To be fair, the information you get from taking this test is important. It can save you from getting into a lot of trouble. But my point is, you have to do a lot more than dropping $200 on Amazon in order to get into the drone game. But no online ad will tell you that. It all seems so simple. Just buy the thing and go fly.
Yeah.
Back to my story. It gets better. The next step was the basic drone exam. I passed it without too much trouble, and for just $10 I had my basic drone license the same day, fresh off my printer. Now I knew a whole lot more about what was allowed and what wasn't, and where I could legally fly. But I no longer had a drone. It was gone. Once again, I was in the market for a beginner drone, and once again, people recommended the DJI Mavic Mini. Compared to the drones I had been looking at, it was expensive. I did not trust myself with an expensive drone, so at first I ordered a drone through Walmart from Bigley Brothers or something like that. It was cheap and had a 1080p camera, no mention of GPS. At least I'd get another shot at this for cheap, right? Didn't I learn anything? The drone took a month or so to arrive. It wasn't at all as described. The brand was different from what had been advertised, and it came with only one battery instead of two. It was a toy weighing under 100 grams. I didn't ever try to fly that drone, knowing it wasn't what I wanted. Instead, I returned it to Walmart immediately. The drone was actually an Eachine product, and you could find it for about $50. But I had been misguided by a stupid ad. It can happen so easily when you're new to drones. They show you some specs and it sounds good. As a beginner, you have nothing to compare it to, so you happily accept what you're getting, thinking that someday you'll get really good at flying and then your drone footage will be great. I wasn't done. Before finally breaking down and buying my first DJI drone, I bought a JJRC X8 Cetus, and I have to admit that I had fun flying it. This is such a simple drone. You could crash it and nothing will happen. I've flown it into trees several times. All you have to do is pick it up and launch again. Great stuff. But it still wasn't really what I wanted. The footage I was getting looked really bad. It was shaky, and the only way to see the horizon in my videos was to fly backwards. The camera was fixed, and the drone has to tilt into the direction it's flying. I finally caught on to the fact that a drone needed a gimbal in order to get steady footage.
Duh.
Finally, I started to realize what set the DJI drones apart. Why had I been so stubborn and wasted money equivalent to the price of a Mavic Mini on two different drones? Back to eBay I went and even put in a few bids. But those things are popular. At a certain price point, it doesn't make sense to buy used stuff. Then the DJI Mini 2 went on special locally. It was a lot more money than I'd been willing to spend, but I went out and got one anyways. From the first flight on, I knew that I had made the right decision. Finally, I was able to control the drone precisely. Even in relatively windy conditions, I could basically park the drone in the air and it would stay put. The footage looked amazing compared to what I'd been accustomed to. The app was also a surprise as it was stable and would tell me exactly where my drone was at any given moment. Well, at this point, I was already quite confident flying. But on my first flight near the river, I lost sight of the drone and decided to use the return to home function. It got scary because I didn't trust the drone at that point and was worried about it landing in the water. I interrupted the return to home and flew toward the shore until the battery was critically low and the drone landed in the grass somewhere. Thanks to the Find My Drone feature, I was able to locate the drone. A few tense minutes and yet another lesson learned. To summarize, are budget drones worth it? It depends. If you're like me and you need time to figure out how to control the drone, at least if something goes wrong, you're not out a huge sum of money. It would have been very discouraging to lose the DJI Mini 2 on the first flight. There are also some very delicate parts on this drone. I'm talking about the gimbal. I've had to repair mine once after an encounter with a tree. But I have to say that crashes are far less likely because of how well this drone responds to the controller, even when it's windy. So here it is. Budget drones like the Holy Stone and the Cetus are fun toys, but they're much harder to control than the DJI, so as a beginner, you may actually get quite frustrated. The footage is shaky unless you spend more money for a drone with a gimbal. Even then, a 4K camera doesn't mean anything, as it's often just a program that enlarges the image. Does it weigh 250 grams or more? Well, in Canada, you'll need a license and registration. Most budget drones won't go very far as they lose connection at a distance of about, say, 400 meters or even less. And they also don't fly for very long. For GPS drones, the cheap ones, you have to do a dance with your drone every single time you fly it to calibrate the compass. My advice: to buy a DJI Mini SE or a Mini 2. You will realize very soon that it's worth every penny. My experience is with the Mini 2, but I'm sure that there are other quality products out there. However, DJI has a huge market presence, and for good reason. Their drones are well made and work as described. They also have GPS, but you don't have to calibrate it every single time before every flight. You won't regret spending the money for a DJI Mini 2. It's a fantastic product, and I'm still amazed at the value you get. I highly recommend this drone, and no, I'm not getting paid by DJI. If you're not convinced, I'll be making another video with a detailed comparison between my Holy Stone, which I finally recovered, and the Mini 2. There's some affiliate links in the description, so click away if you need a good drone. You can support my channel by gently touching like and subscribe. I highly recommend my channel. Why not watch some more videos?